What are the keys to having fantastic intimacy and connection in your relationship? Are men and women really that different in how they connect intimately? On today's show, we'll be discovering that and much more. Welcome to Thriving Launch with Luis Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to sell online? Or maybe you've been thinking about it, but you're reserved to do it because you need a website, you need complicated systems, and you need to spend money? Well, I've created a completely free course that teaches you how to use Facebook in a purely organic way. This means no ads and no money are needed. You can use Facebook completely free. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com. Opt into my Profit from Social Media course. I'm going to teach you the free methods to using Facebook to make money today. Today's guest is Michaela Boehm. She's one of the most gifted counselors and teachers to be found globally. She's actually the only counselor in the world to be personally trained and authorized by David Diada. She's born and raised in Austria. Michaela Boehm really brings us into the heart of love and connection and intimacy. Here we are with Michaela Boehm. It's so exciting to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Oh, it's so awesome to have you here. It's taken us so long to book you, and I know you've got a crazy busy schedule.
We have retreats all over the world.
Yeah, we were looking at your schedule, and it was just like, wow, this lady is just traveling. I wonder if she gets a chance to stay grounded on the planet. So I want to start by asking you, in one of our last interviews with Dr. John Gray, he discussed how modern men and women are evolving and the stress that's putting on both genders, but he really focused a lot on how that impacts women, especially working women, and how that has created so much stress for women that it makes it hard for women to drop down into their feminine, but more so not release enough oxytocin and feel, I guess to put it simply, feel their feminine and feel relaxed. And I'd love to hear from you more about that.
Well, he's right. I would phrase it slightly different based on my experience, or also on being a woman in a certain way. But absolutely, the modern workplace and where we are in Western society puts a big toll on women, puts a big toll on men and women. And I was saying this to you a little bit earlier as we were chatting before the program. I think it's equally important to address it with men than it is with women, because we're talking about intimacy here. When you're saying, well, we're not excreting enough oxytocin anymore and we're not in our feminine. Well, there's a bigger conversation to be had, and the conversation is why and when do we want to be in our feminine or our masculine, for that matter. One of the things that has really happened in this whole discussion about masculine and feminine is that it's become a little bit of a gender issue. And it's actually not a gender issue. There's a masculine and a feminine in both men and women. And there's certain things that are specific to a woman's body. That's what Dr. John Gray is saying, right? And there's things that are specific to a man's body. But that's not to be confused with what's good for the masculine and what's good for the feminine. So there's a very specific distinction that you want to make, which is physiological effects of a certain kind of a stress, work life, computers, influx on a woman's body and on a man's body. And then there's a whole other realm of distinctions as to what that does to one's sexual essence, which is what the masculine and the feminine is actually about.
I love that, because something that is affecting our society so greatly is stress. And, I know how important, and so many of us know how important relaxation is to experiencing more intimacy? How can we connect with someone else when we're stressed out? How can we experience deep intimacy with someone else, and even pleasure when we're stressed and tense?
Yes.
I think relaxation is essential.
Yes.
For feeling more pleasure in our bodies and with someone
Yeah.
else. I'd love to hear, I mean, Luis, I want to take it in this direction because I'm, the intimacy queen, love to talk about intimacy all day. So I'd love to hear more about that from you, about creating intimacy and connection with your partner.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I was saying in the first bit of this, it affects the kind of work life that we have affects men and women. In women, there's a physiological aspect of stress narrowing our energy and tightening the core of our body, which then has a very negative effect on reproductive systems, in the physical manifestation of it. And, like you said, oxytocin, all kinds of things. On the more energetic, sexual, intimate aspect, of course, when you can't feel anything in your body because your body is so tight and stressed and strained, you, of course, can't not only not feel pleasure, but you can also not feel your partner or yourself for that matter and what you need. So self-care, physical relaxation, emotional openness, sexual openness, of course, hinges on the ability to feel, and the ability to feel hinges on a certain kind of opening and relaxation. So, however you slice it, relaxing and opening is the utmost important aspect of all of this. Now, I want to just say something because then we'll go back there because of what you said earlier when you said John Gray was focusing mostly on women. In women, it's very apparent, but it's also important to know that, of course, in a man's body, stress and computer work and all the things that come with a modern lifestyle also takes a big toll and has for many years, as you all know. And nowadays it's pretty balanced, but it used to be that men had a lot more heart disease and stress and strokes. But coming back to the intimacy piece, that same tension and lack of relaxation, of course, makes men unembodied. And an unembodied man is equally as I don't know what the word would be, as tough to be intimate with than a disembodied woman. So it's not all on the woman to embody herself and become juicy or alive or whatever you want to call it. It's also something to consider for men so that they're actually in their bodies and also able to feel and connect. It goes both ways.
I really am glad that you brought that up. I know that's something that I've been doing Tantra for many years, and I kind of sometimes put a little bit too much responsibility on myself to hold that piece. If I'm embodied enough, then it will draw him in, which is true. But also, I love that you're encompassing the man too, that to bring him in and have him have the practice as well.
Yeah, well, that I think is one of the big pieces, particularly in the realm of tantric practice, and there's a lot out there. That's what I meant a little bit with the gender war. It's become such that everybody points fingers, in certain directions. Well, you're not feminine enough. You're not in your masculine. Those kind of things become, they're as oppressive a label and a prescription of a lifestyle than any other. And it's important to realize that, of course, in the very depth of the practices, when we talk about tantric or sacred sexual or intimacy practices, what we're talking about is the melding and the coming together of what so euphemistically is called, the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, which is nothing else but human beings who have gotten enough of their own stuff out of the way and have gotten enough basic understanding of who they are that they can connect with each other from a place of generosity and relaxation and fulfillment and openness and give to each other. And so ultimately that state requires that both men and women are self-responsible. And then from that self-responsibility comes a movement towards giving to each other. When people just give to each other from a place of lack or need, it's a whole different story. You can't override certain things. But in essence, what we're looking at is consciousness and light combining themselves, dancing, right? And what that means is a man who is deeply relaxed, open, and aware or awake, combining with a woman who is relaxed and able to let life flow through her. So surrender is essentially is required from both parties. The man needs to surrender as much as the woman into the flow of life, and then in the flow of life, or in the expression of that flow, one partner takes on one role while the other partner takes on another role, solely for the sake of the sexual polarity. That's not necessarily in all of life. It's necessary in intimacy and polarity. What you do in your life, at work, or with your children, follows completely different rules.
I love that you are bringing up this piece about the sacred feminine and masculine. And one thing that I see people getting stuck with is this idealism that when I do these things, when I am finally awake enough as a man, and when I am finally relaxed enough as a woman, that I will be in my sacred feminine and masculine. And I think the piece that we can really work with and in our daily lives is bringing in hints of it, continuing to embody hints of it. And then as we practice it, it becomes more and more and more in our lives, and more of who we are. What do you think about that?
Well, yes, I think that is absolutely true. But how can you be anything else but a sacred masculine or a sacred feminine? Right?
Absolutely. I love that.
Because, and once again, the important piece to know is that in every woman is masculine and feminine, because that's just the way we're built. We just have a preference as far as our sexual essence goes. And in every man is a masculine and a feminine as well. So the reason why it's become so important for people to cultivate their essence is because the world in itself is a place in which that's not apparent anymore, right? But every man should also be very comfortable with his sacred feminine, and every woman should be as comfortable with her sacred masculine, so to speak. And then for the sake of the sexual attraction or polarity or play, one person really steps into one aspect and the other person steps into the other aspect. So one goes extreme feminine, one goes extreme masculine, so that there is a big arc of sexual attraction, so to speak. But the important piece and the very, very difficult piece in all self-improvement, all workshops, in everything that we're talking about here, is that people conflate doing practices with getting somewhere. So it's if I just do this, if I can learn this, then I'm going to be okay. If I learn this, I become enlightened or awakened. Well, the state of enlightenment or awakening or realization is a spontaneous realization of every moment as it is, right? It's feeling what is completely without any contraction or restriction against what is actually happening. Well, that's available in any moment. What we are talking about...
That's so beautiful. Go ahead, continue.
So what we're talking about is learning skills so that in each moment you are more artfully expressing your human potential. That's a whole different story.
Well, I like that story a lot, and I want to dive into that. It definitely, while you were talking, one of the things that I really thought about is, as a relationship coach working with primarily couples, one of the key symptoms that I found in a relationship when couples come to me is that they're stuck on some sort of issue, and that issue has created a knot.
Yes.
And they want to unkink that knot. The flow of energy isn't working the way that they should, and so their communication is knotted, their bodies are tense.
Yes.
And there's usually one subject. What I found is that generally the solution is always the same. It's gotten to a place where I barely have to listen to the content. I am more interested in how they're responding to each other. What has your experience been around that with couples?
Yeah, definitely the exact same thing, right? It's well, there's a lot to be said about that, because what you're saying is right. After a while, you can tell very quickly what it is that's the grievance, or the thing that the people are being stuck. And that's not to be taken lightly, simply because once you get stuck, you can't move forward at all. And often these complaints are very specifically about, or mostly these complaints are very specifically about the areas we're talking about. You don't do this. I don't get this from you. You never, you always. And what it usually centers around is a strong discontent with how the essence is represented in the relationship, so to speak. And the unknotting of that particular knot from the outside, of course, is very easy, right? I mean, I'm sure you, like I, can just look at it and go, well, here's the solution. The reason why that's not so, for the most part, and even if you temporarily unknot it, it usually comes back in some other form, is the knot is the replication of a childhood pattern. So how we perceive love is, of course, decided on how we first perceived love. And so our patterns of behavior around getting love or the lack of love are determined way, way earlier than when we have intimate relationships. But that stays present within the relationship. And it's quite interesting. I don't know if you've ever read these studies that couples who get married essentially get attracted and get married because they subconsciously can tell that they're going to replicate each other's childhood patterns. But
yeah,
that is the story.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's something that Harville
exactly.
Hendricks talks a lot
That's
about.
his specialty, essentially.
Yeah.
But the part of the study that I find the most fascinating is that when people have arranged marriages, it takes a lot longer, but both parties will induce those behaviors in the other person anyway after a while. So if your parents picked your spouse and that spouse actually doesn't have that particular thing that you are after, you're not going to feel attracted to that person. But
that's actually the same thing that a client was just saying to me. It's just like, my father was abusive, and I think I push people until I make them abusive, just because that's what's familiar.
Yeah.
And I love that Luis has a episode with Dr. Harville Hendricks, which is, goes into that, which I love that study.
Yeah, I mean, imago therapy and everything that comes with it is very precisely, aligned with that school of thought. And of course, how that then plays out sexually is the exact same way, right? You replicate the kind of behavior that gives you the kind of love you want, which is not always the love you need.
Well, I love that, and I'm really curious about what you would say are some of the practices to take into the bedroom or take into our intimate relationships. I know that Harville Hendricks has a huge practice around it, but I'd love to hear the tantric version of it, which Luis and I have been exploring, but I would love to hear your side of that.
Well, of course, there's very specific practices, right? Like things like creating intimacy through, making time, making space, keeping eye contact, doing practices that entrain you into each other's field, so to speak, so that you can feel each other more. Like breathing together or things like that. In the more sexual aspects of tantric practices, there's, of course, whole instructions on how to circulate energy through the body and all kinds of very detailed skill sets that can be learned. For most of us, just taking time, making space, creating kind of a bubble, putting things in place that allow you to have feeling ability towards yourself and the other person are the first steps. Then of course we can talk about specific, sexual things. But I would say that the most important skill one can acquire in relationship and in sexual relationship is actually generosity.
Oh, I love that. And that generosity is such a breeding ground for gratitude and
Mm-hmm.
love. That, I mean, if we're being generous to someone else, I mean, that just opens the heart. And I think you really pinpointed something where you were talking about slowing down. And I think if people just slowed down more in their lives, in their bodies, in their bedrooms, that there would be a whole new experience. Luis, did you have a question that you wanted to add in here?
Well, I wanted to hear more about the
Mm,
generosity
mm,
piece. I really like that word, and it made me feel great.
mm. Well, one of the things that I found definitely, I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while. I did many years of counseling, like one-on-one, hour after hour after hour, both individuals and couples. And I've always taught, but only in the last 6 or 7 years have I taught as extensively as I have. And so both in my private practice and in the workshops, and particularly recently, I've with people who've done, a little bit of quote unquote the work in some form. The whole construct of the masculine and the feminine is incredibly useful because it really explains a lot. And it's a very, very good way of looking at one's behaviors. And the pitfalls, of course, like I said, with the sacred masculine, sacred feminine, is that there's a certain kind of an entitlement or a certain kind of set of expectations that make us often not as generous as we could be. And what I mean with generosity is to understand and know that whatever knots and contractions we have, the thing that you talk about when you work with couples is a product of our upbringing and our conditioning. And the first thing that needs to be applied is compassion, knowing that, of course, if we could do different, we would do different. And then also knowing that if you wait for your partner to change or make the move, you're going to wait for a long time. And so
Maybe forever.
right? Because the way it goes is that the giving of love and the giving of intimacy and the giving of connection between, let's just talk about two people who know each other and who are in relationship, requires a certain kind of just giving it because, and not as a conditional interaction based on merit or who did what and why. And there's a whole other conversation we could have about sexual entitlement and sexual currency and things like that. But in the most basic way, if you're with somebody and you want to connect and you want to have an intimate life, you might want to consider just giving of yourself, regardless if the situation and the conditions are perfect. And within that, like you said, there's something that feels really good, and there's a certain kind of a magic when you take yourself out of that contraction of the, I'm not going to do this till you do that. And you didn't do this for me yesterday, and so I'm not going to make the first move. And you need to claim me. You are the man, or you need to be relaxed and feminine. You are the woman. There's all kinds of stuff that kicks in. That when you really take that away, there's two human beings who want to love each other. They want to be in relationship. So you might as well give to that a little bit more than you think you want to, based on transactional policy, so to speak, because it's not a transactional policy. It's a free flow of love and intimacy and connection, in which magic can only happen if it's not parsed out by merit.
Early on when I started dating, one of the biggest issues that I had was I really thought a lot about how much I was giving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would give, and then I'd be like, wait, she's not giving back. What's going on, And kind of relationship after relationship, or just dating really, I experienced that. And I had conversation with one of the wisest teachers in my life, which is my dad.
Mhm.
And he said, Louisa, it sounds like you're creating a tally board. And if you want to be in the type of relationship that I know you want, then that's not going to exist for you. You're going to give because you love, and you may never have that acknowledged or given back in the way that you want. But trust me, if you continue with your giving nature, you will find the type of partner that reciprocates and loves you deeply for who you are. Because that's in my nature, is I want to give first, and I want to continually do that. And I'm human. I do look for ways that I'm receiving, or I have a sense of, okay, is this partner a match for me in the way that I like to give, which I think are excellent points to have. What I will say is that the more that I've focused on giving to my partner and then noticing the way that she gives, the more that I've been happy.
Yes. That's kind of the secret to all existence, essentially, is that you're never going to receive what you want, but you can give it. Now, because of the childhood wound that we talked about earlier, right, we are built to have a void, and that particular void is what we want. And of course, it's a bottomless hole, and your partner can shovel whatever you say you want in there till the end of time. It's never going to be enough. But in the giving, of course, there's a certain kind of a magic that smoothes out that hole. The one thing that I would add to it is that that's not to be confused with martyrdom, self-sacrifice, or giving oneself up, right? You can only give from a place of abundance and not from a place of lack. So if you give in a relationship because that's your way of making sure that you're not being left, or that's your way of making sure that you're always having the upper hand in the giving department, or it's a need, or it's a fear, then of course this is not going to work, because you're going to be so depleted and then very resentful and all kinds of things. But if you're coming from a place of abundance where you feel that you have enough to give, and you're giving so freely without keeping the tally, like your dad said, then that's the generosity I'm speaking about.
I'm fortunate enough that my dad really lives that and has given me an example of that. And he's such an abundant person. I mean, I've never ever met a person that didn't like him, and he just loves, for me, he's a being of love. And I've never seen him give from a place where it was like, I'm going to give so you give back to me, or I'm going to give so I can keep track. It's just, hey, I'm Ernie, and this is who I am. And, how's your day going?
Yeah.
And that, to me, I think is the key. And that's one of the reasons why we thought it was great to bring you on here, because the practices that you teach are all about cultivating that sense of self-love and depth within yourself, so that, as you said earlier, you're living your full human potential in every moment.
I really want to repeat what you said, because it was so beautiful. You're never going to receive what you want, but you can give it. And that alone is such a nugget to take away from this interview, because it can change the whole game with how we're interacting with our partners. If we know that we're never going to receive it, then we can't keep demanding it. So I think that was really, really well said, and a beautiful point.
It points towards something that, of course, we all intuit, but that's a very difficult concept when actually presented with it, which is surrender. Right? Because when we talk about you can't actually get it. In that, you have two choices. One is resignation, and one is surrender. And resignation, of course, makes you close down and bitter and hard, while surrender creates kind of this beautiful yet aching relaxation with what is.
Michaela, that was a really wonderful place to end a part of this episode, and I want to transition to another wonderful space. And I'm curious, I'm hopeful that you'll take interest in it. One of the ways that I would love to end this interview is through a little meditation, And I'm curious if you would be willing to guide the audience, the listeners, through a little meditation to somehow just drop into the moment. How does that sound?
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, we will let you take it away. And
Okay.
as you do that, I am going to close my eyes and just listen.
How long do you want this piece to be?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So then, to begin with, wherever you're listening to this, of course, you don't do this in the car, but wherever you can actually close your eyes and relax your body in a position where you can feel your body. So that could be sitting on a chair, sitting cross-legged, laying down, either which way is good. And before you do anything else, as you close your eyes, take a moment and feel where your eyes are situated once you close them. Are they rolled up in your head, or are they pointing straight out as if your closed eyelids can be seen from your eyeballs behind them? So just feel that for a moment, and if you can, point your eyes straight out as if you're looking through your closed eyelids into a very dark, vast night sky. But try not to roll up your eyes. It does a very specific thing to your nervous system. That's very good for the nervous system. So as you are gazing out through your closed eyelids into the vast darkness of the night sky, just start feeling your body and where it holds tension and where it holds relaxation. And don't change anything. Just notice what is actually happening in your body. And at the same time, let your breath flow however your breath wants to flow. So make no imposition on your breath, but just notice how your breath naturally flows in this moment, in your varying states of tension and relaxation. And then notice if you have any judgment in your mind about how tense or relaxed you are. And witness that thought pattern going on as much as you witness your body's tension or relaxation and your breath's depth or shallowness or irregularity. And for the time being, do absolutely nothing with all this information, but simply let your body do what your body is doing in this moment. And then from here, take your attention down to your feet and feel your feet. Notice how much or how little you can feel your feet. Feel how your feet touch the surface, either sitting or standing or laying down. What part of your feet touches the surface? Then feel your hands and feel where your hands touch your body or a surface. And then feel the back of your body, your buttocks, your lower back, and where it touches the surface. And with the awareness on your feet and hands, let your next breath, without much push, but just with enough attention, let your next breath be a little bit deeper down the front of your body. So if you're just breathing into your chest, breathe maybe down into your solar plexus. Or if you're breathing into your solar plexus, then take your breath down into the belly. But make sure that there's no pressure applied to your breath. You're just gently deepening as more air comes into your body. All the while keeping attention on your feet and hands, perhaps wiggling a toe or a finger. And allowing the breath to begin relaxing the front surface of your body. Noticing what your breath does naturally and what your breath does when you take it a little bit deeper into the lower parts of your body. And then noticing the parts of your body that feel aware and connected. You're going to bring yourself back to regular awareness, opening your eyes and still noticing if you can feel where your body touches the surface, if you can feel how your breath impacts the front surface of your body, and see how much you can keep the awareness of your hands and feet and of the surfaces you touch with you as you continue throughout your day.
Oh, thank you so much for that journey. I love that.
I feel so much more relaxed.
I love that piece of holding the awareness throughout the day and how much we can bring that awareness in. Really, it doesn't have to be some big mission or practice, but even just allowing our breath to tap more into the moment and being aware of what our feet are doing and what our hands are doing and what our breath is doing. Thank you so much for being here. We've been here with Michaela Boehm, and I would love to hear, is there any last brief piece that you want to leave our audience with? Well,
just tying into what we said in the very beginning, right, which is the need for humans, men and women alike, and women in more distinct ways because of the way we built, but the need to slow down, relax, move, stay embodied is essentially addressed in this tiny little meditation I just did. It's not a big deal, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just a matter of reminding ourselves that we do have a body, and feeling and sensation and sensitivity and intimacy and sexuality come through our bodies. And so anything that can be done to stay embodied will increase our ability to be connected.
Yeah, maybe next time we do an interview on a meditation on an interview, one of us should not do the meditation because I think we're both.
Well, the whole idea, of course, is have that state even while you're doing an interview, right? You were saying in the beginning, how do I stay grounded with traveling this much? Well, this is how. You just don't forget you have a body. And you stick with your body no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge, beautiful missing piece, and I love that you've invited us all into our bodies more and to give us that gift this day. And thank you so much, Michaela Boehm. We have enjoyed this interview immensely.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
On our next episode, we've brought on Elliot Holtz to talk about changing your mindset, how to have a powerful mindset. He's the creator of Strength Camp, has several million views on YouTube, and he's highly inspirational. So be sure to tune into our next episode with Elliot Holtz.